Welcome to Smart Business Show. I just got off the phone, virtual phone, also Zoom, with Gavin from Acuity Scheduling, found at acuityscheduling.com. And I first heard him on Hack the Process. You'll get a bit of this in the intro. So today we talk about how we got started and what did work look like, because he had a full-time job and Acuity Scheduling on the side. We talk about how did he handle dev and support at the beginning and how his schedule kind of went. We talk about what it meant, what it was like to make the decision to give up on his job, which he loved, and move to Acuity Scheduling full time. How those conversations went with his spouse, and then we talked about constraints, which is really good. It's a really good all around conversation with Gavin from Acuity Scheduling. And if you think you know someone that would be great to talk to, that would be interesting, then by all means recommend a guest. Without further ado, here's Gavin. So welcome to Small Business Show. Today we're talking to Gavin, and I forgot to ask your last name before, so I'm going to say Gavin from Acuity. It's just scheduling software. And I was interested in Gavin because I heard him on Hack the Process, and I'll put a link in the show notes to that episode. It was just really good. And the things I was most interested in were his work before he took Acuity full time, and now his work after, and specifically the constraints he puts on his days. So would you tell me a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me on here. So my company, Acuity Scheduling, we help small businesses offer and manage appointments online. So it was actually originally created for my mom. She's a massage therapist, and I saw her struggling and going back and forth with all the craziness and rigmarole that goes around booking an appointment, and knew that there had to be a better way. So being a tech guy by nature, I first tried to find what else was out there, and there wasn't that much. And everything that was out there was really overpriced back in 2007 when we did this. So I created Acuity, and at the time I had another full-time job that I actually really loved, but kept Acuity going as a side project until it grew and grew and grew and grew, and to the point where I had to make a decision between my day job and Acuity. But now we help, beyond just my mom, who's still a user, help tens of thousands of other businesses, from everything like I imagine, like massage therapists, to life coaches, business folks, real estate, bowling alleys, cupcake delivery, anybody whose day-to-day revolves around scheduling appointments. So it's been a thrill to watch it grow.
Cool. So you said just now that you grew and grew and grew until you had to make a decision. Mm-hmm. Like, what did that look like? What were the stressors as you came to that point where you had to make a decision?
Yeah, I think the one good thing that I just loved my day job. I had a job with the government that I absolutely loved, and I really didn't want to leave that job for Acuity. But it got to the point when I was working like 8 to 10 hour days with commuting an hour each way into Washington, D.C. And Acuity had also grown to the point, since I'm a developer, I created it by myself, and I also supported it too. So it had gotten to the point when it grows and you get more referrals and more signups, where a lot of those logistical things at the beginning that don't take up that much time, like especially customer support, start sucking up even more time. So it had gotten to the point when after my normal day, I was spending about 6 or so hours working on little improvements and bug fixes and support emails and all of that, and on my hour commute trying to type on my iPhone at the same time, and that just wasn't scaling. I wasn't happy with that, and what little time that I had to work on it ended up getting sucked into the things that I really didn't enjoy. So I knew that I had to change something, and I tried to hire somebody into customer support, and when you have a day job without a phone or email access at the same time, it's a little bit difficult. You need to support the people that you're hiring. You can't just toss them into the ocean and let them be. So and even after that, in my effort to try to keep my day job, it turned into something where I was like, all right, now I got to make the decision. What do I do? And
you had to quit one or the other.
Yeah, it was really. And Acuity, I mean, the upside of it, and it's so hard. Like with Acuity, if it's my other job, I knew if I left, they'll just hire somebody else. But with Acuity, there's no leaving it. I actually really enjoy supporting people, and it's one of the things that I absolutely love is when I see people using it. That gives me joy. So I couldn't leave them at all. And the upside was so much more too.
I was actually listening to the owners of, the original founders of Reddit last night, and they 2 nights ago, they said that they left, they sold it, they did it 3 years, they exited, and then 5 years later, there was like it was just all going downhill, and they just felt like it was their baby, so they came back as employees of. They came back and they buy it. Anyways, they came back to this thing that they had like got out of and had been out of for 5 years, and they just came back and love it, and still run it years and years later now. So.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And actually that's the thing too. I'm not really in this for the money. I'm in it to be happy. And I think it's very rare that you have a job that you truly love. And I did love my last one, so I wanted to vow to keep this as something that I would really enjoy. And if you're solely into grow and exit, that's not something that I particularly enjoy. You give up control and you give up like just rapid growth. Isn't that fun to me? What is fun is building something genuinely useful, and to be able to do that has to be a slow and steady growth. So despite everything, Acuity has grown, and it has grown steadily over time, and it's grown in a way that I feel really comfortable with, where I'm not feeling pressured by VCs or other people backing to do that thing where you exit and then you just cry at seeing the direction that it had gone in. So this way I can stay in control and stay hopefully enjoying it, and hopefully all the employees that have joined me in this too can keep loving what they're doing as well.
Mm-hmm. So back to when you're handling dev and support at the same time, what did that look like? Were you like just jumping between things as support emails came in? Were you like doing a block of development time and then support? Or
Oh yeah, so it changed over time. When you start out, so with Acuity, just to think about how it was promoted, which was basically zero. At the very first, I focused a bit on SEO and just getting it out there. So which leads to a really nice trickle of maybe like one sign up a day. I remember the first person who signed up and sent in an email, and I was thrilled to actually get that email. As it grows though, then all of a sudden you get emails from existing users, and you generally get more emails from new users. So the faster you grow, the more emails you get. So the ratio of support to development time changed. At the very beginning, it was mostly me building things, and most of my time making improvements just out of my own thoughts. As we grow, we get more user feedback, and that user feedback drives development. Some of that are legitimate bugs, which is generally the minority. The majority are things like UX improvements, where you go, oh man, I really shouldn't have gotten this email. Like, this email gives no value to me or them to send in. So you try to add a little bit of extra copy or change the interaction for it. And then there are other things that are just total feature requests. As things grow and it gets more stable, as you add like the right features for the product, more people end up being satisfied, and because more people are being satisfied, you have a higher conversion rate, and because of that too, you end up with this growing user base and this growing long tail of support too. So at the very beginning, when I was building things in direct response to people and like making UX improvements and feature improvements, that was a ton of fun. What became less fun was later on, when I got to that like tipping point when I had to choose between my day job and the other, was the day was actually mostly with customer support and doing those bug fixes and like tiny UX fixes and all the bigger ideas that you had to like revamp something to make it even easier to use, add new ways to like model availability, and just add like bigger new features. I didn't really have a block of time that I was able to do that. So it was, and I could definitely have forced away and like stopped doing emails. And I did that during some periods. Mostly it would be like on weekends, like on a Saturday morning when I'd have a block of time like that. But I also really value helping people use the software effectively, because that's half the challenge. So I didn't want to give up, doing support in favor of doing development. So that's the point that made me decide that something material had to change in the business, and that meant hiring on more people to help with support, so that people could continue to have quality support without giving up development.
And so how did the evening and weekend time go over at home? Were you married then, or were you in a relationship then?
Yeah, so my wife and I were coming up on our 10-year anniversary. So we were dating in college, which is about when I came up with Acuity. And looking back, even then, she was like, "Why are you bothering to do this? Like, trying to get me to stop and do other things. And I liked it, so I found the time enjoyable. So what I did in the beginnings was say, like, when we got monthly payments in, Acuity was pretty much profitable from day one. I'd be like, all right, like, we're making $50 a month. Let's go out to dinner. And this dinner would be on Acuity. And
Mm.
it got to be the point when, because I had another job at the time too, which was a benefit that anything made from Acuity, I vowed to be fun things. So that helped convince her at the very beginning. And um, she was also part of the reason why, when I was spending so many hours at home later after my day job, that I really knew that I had to make a decision. And she was thankfully supportive either way. But yeah, she definitely pushed, and she helped push, some constraints onto me too. Because if it were just me on my own, I probably would go down the rabbit hole and work crazy hours, and not stop myself. So having her helps to balance me for sure.
Awesome. How did those discussions go? I know we were saying, and the other time my wife used to ask me, so just before we started recording, my wife used to ask me all the time, like, did you finish everything at the today? And I'd always be like, I know I work for myself. There is no finishing everything. There is always something left to do. So it took a long time for her to stop asking that. Just like I stopped asking, saying, oh, the baby slept well last night, because I just sleep like a stone. My wife was up till 3 a.m. last night, actually. She told me this today, and I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'm glad I didn't say anything.
Lovely. Yeah. I know how that is. Now we have a kid many
Mm.
years later, and that has also helped force more constraints on me. But yeah, in the early days, it was mostly, I guess, just her confusion about it. Like, why would you work on something that, you're definitely? I apparently valued my time at zero when I say that it was profitable.
Mm.
I was more valuing the concrete costs, but because I enjoyed it. So she would wonder why I was spending time on something that, didn't really have that much. And it's because I enjoyed it. But I did share the occasional stories about our users and what folks were doing and who was who. And I think that helped engage her a little bit. But in general, I try to keep my work life and my home life separate, because that's like for my personal sanity. If I am thinking about work all the time, then my mind never shuts off. And I find that I do need a balance to maintain it. And I think Acuity is definitely a lesson on focus over the long term, because we've been going at this for a decade now. So to stay with the same thing for 10 years and still enjoy it day to day, you definitely
Mm.
have to have balance, and you can't work the marathon weeks. It's definitely something where you have to, stay steady over the long term. So separating those sides of my life has helped that too.
So how do you do that? Around here, like I take my laptop off the stand here in
Hmm.
my bedroom office and stick it in a drawer, right? I go downstairs, my phone, I give it to my kid, and she sticks it in a charging drawer at the one end of the house, and it just stays there. What tactics or strategies have you adopted to keep those things apart?
Yeah, so it was 2013 when I left my day job to go do Acuity full time, and that's when I had to really decide. Prior to that, it was really just my laptop, and it was working and deciding when I was done. After that, when you go from having being forced to do all of your work into a couple hours a day and thinking about it the rest, to just having this like unlimited span of time when you wake up in the morning and your time is the work time, that's definitely when I found the need to really enforce those separation. So at first, I worked out of my apartment, which was a one-bedroom apartment in Washington, D.C., with a desk in it, and that was not good. Eventually, I would try to get out and like go outside and work from parks and things, and that worked a little bit, but not that great. Eventually, we ended up, since after I left my job, there was no reason to be tied physically to the Washington, D.C. area, and I always wanted to live in New York City, so we did that. And in New York, I tried the whole, like, we had an apartment building with a nice common area, and I tried working out of there, which was good, and like coffee shops, but I found that really hard to focus. So the thing that I have found most effective is a physically separate office space in New York that was WeWork, which is phenomenal because they make coffee for me all day long. So I thrive there. And now that I moved from New York to Pennsylvania because of the baby, the one key thing that we were looking for in a house was a nice separate office for me that's separated from like the area where everybody is and playing and everything, so that I can have peace and quiet. And I know at the end of the day, I can just close the door and leave my desktop in there, and I won't have to look at it at all.
Mm-hmm. So do you also like keep the email off your phone and stuff?
Yeah. So on my phone, I do have email on there, but I just try not to look at it. I also have my Apple Watch, which is even
Mm.
worse for me now. Like I use it for exercise and everything,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
also get alerts on there. So
Hmm.
I try to turn off as much as I can, and I am aggressive about doing like filters on my phone and everything else. And thankfully for our team, we use a different tool, Help Scout, which I don't have going to my phone at all. So I'm
Mm.
able to, like just stay away from that. And then what we use for chat too, Slack, I have just all notifications turned off. So when I'm
Yeah, yeah.
working, I have the app open and available, and I can quickly shut it to focus on things. Like now, as I'm talking to you, it's nice and shut off.
Hmm.
That also means when I step away at the end of the day, it's just naturally shut off.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's.
the first thing I shut off on my it's a Sunto like mountaineering watch was all the notifications. It's like I don't want any of them. I don't care. I don't want to hear about it. Just turn them off because
I know.
around here randomly it'll connect. I'm like way out the mountains, like 100K back down some valley, and I'm like, I guess I'm high enough to like catch a cell signal off something. I just don't want to know.
Yeah, I don't either. Like I want it for basically GPS and everything else, and for workouts. And yeah, I don't want to know my email on my phone. I really
Nope.
like, I had my calendar on there at first. I was like, oh no, this is not fun. I don't like knowing what like my very next event is all the time when I look at my wrist.
Yeah, yeah. Mine doesn't even do that. Mine just lets me know what text messages and phone calls. I don't even I don't even want that. So um so you unhack the process you're talking about. Now correct me if I'm wrong here. Is it 4 day weeks and 6 hour days, or is it what was it exactly? Because you do
Oh
shorter
yeah.
days than most people do, right? Like
Oh yeah.
the whole
So
company does in general.
yeah, so everybody in support does 6 hour work days.
Hmm.
So I don't know. Like personally, I am not a fan of the startup culture of long hours at all costs to build something. I'm more into building something that could be a sustainable company over the long term that I'll enjoy working at, and I really enjoy working around people who are energized and
Hmm.
happy. And especially for customer support, that energy that you have throughout the day really translates into how you're talking to customers. So all of our support folks work 6 hour days, 5 days a week. So you do a 3 hour chunk of time, take a couple hours break, and then another 3 hour chunk of time. So that way you have a nice break in the middle of the day. You can come back
Hmm.
energized, and it's not like somebody working, the traditional 8 hour day with a half-hour lunch break in between. And the last few hours of your day, you're just completely drained, and you're like, oh, screw this.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's
yeah.
exactly how I do my days. I do 6 to 9 a.m., take off 2 to 3 hours, and then come back noon to 3 most days. Tuesdays are usually
Yeah.
my exception where I come back about an hour early because I'm on calls for my second chunk of the day. But
Yeah, and I totally don't consider that a benefit at all. I just consider that just good business. Like it just makes
mm,
sense to do that. Like when we do our job postings, I try not to mention that because I
mm,
mean, there's always the chance that it could change over time if we find people just like aren't using their time effectively during their 6 hours. If they're because I feel like you can get an 8 hour day
yeah,
worthwhile
yeah,
work.
a traditional 8 hour day worth of
Yeah.
work. Yeah,
So maybe we'll change that eventually, but for now, I find that's the most effective, and it keeps the energy going. So, but because of that too, it's not something like you're getting. Although you are getting extra time, it's something that's good for the business, and it's not a benefit for you. I'm not doing this for you, the employee. I'm doing this, both to keep you happy, but mostly for our customers that they can see and get great support all throughout the day, and not just first thing in the morning.
that's got to help your staff too with their like with just balance and home life. I know for myself, like 2 weeks ago, my wife had to take two of our kids to the doctor. And so the older kid, like I showed up to the doctor, took her out on a bike ride, and went to the library. And then I got back to work, like after spending an hour just reading books in the library and taking some out with her. That was like a good,
Yeah.
like dad moment, right? Because it's funny because I've worked at home my entire life. My oldest daughter, she's always, even today at 9 o'clock in the morning, Daddy, are you done work yet? I'm like, no. You're
Aw.
never done work. I'm like, I know you always say that, but you have no idea. If I was doing something like driving to Vancouver, I'd leave at 6 a.m. I'd get back at 6 p.m. You'd see me eat for an hour.
Yeah, and everybody also works remotely too.
Yep.
So you gain back that time that would have been
Mm.
commuting. You gain back that time in the middle of your day, and it's really because we trust people. And I think work, to me, it just makes sense to work remote too, because we're able to have people. So we want, like, for
Mm.
customer support, we want a large coverage of hours, and we can just hire people to work normal days, wherever they are in Scotland or Greece or anything else. And we
Mhm.
get that coverage for the whole time. And, you're working a few less hours, you're not having commuting. So hopefully, yeah, you can be happier, and we get great people from all around the world too.
Have you had many struggles with people being productive in those 6 hours?
Um, it depends. So, we came up with a 6 hour day thing pretty independently without looking at, what other people have done with that.
Mm.
And there are
There's tons of research supporting it right
There
now, right?
has been tons of research. And one of the things that people say with the research is that you get, fewer sick days and time
Mm.
off, because of the 6 hour days. We haven't seen that. I think that's probably been one of the biggest struggles, is that people really don't take any difference in time off. Uh, in the six, like, they still just take as much time off, so we still offer that. So yeah, I think with our 6 hour days, the real benefit is really like in the micro part of your energy in the day, not
Mm.
with the overall throughout the year, your time off, or anything else
It's
too.
that rest in the middle that lets you come back fired up and
Yeah,
recharged and ready to
yeah.
go again. Cool. Well, thank you for your time. I enjoyed the conversation. I'll probably listen through before we officially start the podcast and maybe grab a snippet or two out of there, because there's some good stuff there. We talked about constraints then
Mhm.
and how that was really awesome. I don't even go over that now. You were talking about constraints earlier and how with having the other job, it made you really decide what was important, right? At the beginning.
Yeah,
And not
yeah.
just looking at the shiny object syndrome of, oh, here's some new feature, right? Or,
Yeah, absolutely. And personally, I really enjoyed that way of working when I had the other job, because when I had an idea, I would stew on it in the back of my mind for hours. So when it came time to, actually work on something, I was very efficient with my time, and I would spend so much more time, working on the right things. So like whenever we ended up doing like gift certificates. That was something that I had worked on when I was still had my day job, and I had been thinking about that for a while, so I knew exactly how I wanted to implement it. I had been thinking about it long enough that I had chatted back and forth with a few people over email who had requested it or needed something similar, so I knew that it was something valuable. And because there was just such a big backlog of things to do and not enough time to do it, I knew that I had to focus on the things that were the absolute most important, to go from just creating something to creating something with like true value for the customers. So all of those other, shiny object types of things, like changing the branding on our marketing page, which I absolutely had to do, and like adding some new logos, and like changing the design and things, and changing like some UI interactions and all of that, I knew weren't as important as adding actually a new feature, adding gift certificates. So when it came down to it, I knew that I was working on the exact most important thing at the time, and how I was implementing it, I knew was the most efficient use of my time too, that I wasn't going to be waffling around with a bunch of different ideas, that I got right down to work, and I got right down to work on the right thing too. So I do miss that part of it, where I have my open days now and can work on anything. So I have to write down all of the ideas and, let them simmer for a little bit, so I can know that what I'm working on is actually the best use of my time. And it's actually so much harder now that I have more time.
hmm. Do you need to, get a job at the coffee shop and limit some of your time
Yeah,
again?
maybe I do that, or I just start reading in my backyard and say that's my day job, and the Kiwi's my side one.
I know for myself, like I was saying earlier, I write down all my ideas that I have coming up in what I call, I guess, the 12-week idea folder.
Hmm.
And then every 12 weeks, I will look at them and see what's actually pertinent, what's useful, and what's not fiddling. And most of the time, probably 50% of them, I just X off right away, because either I have no idea what I was talking about, or I'm like, this is a dumb idea at the time. And then I filter down quite quickly to the ones I'm going to work on for the next 12 weeks. Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, for me, it's Trello.
Mm.
Well, now I have a couple of Trello boards, but like the main one for the app is like potential ideas, accepted ideas, and things that we need to work on right now. So the whole team works sort of in that
Mm.
flow, where potential ideas we just write down write all the ideas that we have, let them stew in there for a bit so that we can collect emails of people who request it or who could be helped by it, so that when it does come out, we can email them. But then when it is something really important, and we've got actually a lot of those things, move over to accepted ideas. And then when we actually do them, it's really great to, close the feedback loop and go back to everybody who had requested it or something similar and let them know that, sort of what they had input on was finally released and they can see it too.
It's got to be a great feedback mechanism to keep them, I guess, in love with the product, right? Because they can see that they actually had something to do. I heard, where did I hear it recently? But like the best way to get like a mentor without officially having a mentor is to email someone, get any advice they have, and let them know how it went like a month later, because they'll be like, oh, they actually tried it out, and as opposed to just taking the advice and running away with it, not saying anything. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is really good, actually. It's a very intentional feedback loop, because early on when it was just me, that was something very natural where I was doing 100% of the support. I would read 100% of the things, and I was also the developer, so I could do things quickly. So as we're growing, it's been a challenge. Like we have to intentionally go after a lot of those things that were natural before and intentionally try to still keep really fast cycles with development and not have everything go into a backlog too. So for all the little things, we'll actually, the process that I'm described as more for bigger ideas that we'll let sit for a little while and there's no immediate need to do it, which is about half of our time. And then the other half is a lot of immediate things, but much smaller. That way bugs don't linger. You can tell people like, oh, that little oddball UX interaction you saw, that's totally fixed now, like, thank you. And they definitely feel more invested in the product. And I think because of that, people are more likely to refer it to your friends. So it's more enjoyable for me, and it's good business practice too.
It's funny how much or how often good business practice follows with just like treating people nicely and following up with them and stuff.
Yeah, that's the long-term view that you have to take on it, though, because in the short term, I don't know, a lot of it isn't as immediately profitable. And I hear this a lot when I interview folks and we're chatting about how the past company that they worked with dealt with refunds. It's probably the most immediate place that you see it, where a lot of like the tight money places who are really tight on money refuse to give refunds, and you just end up with angry customers. Like, giving away a tiny bit of money, and like somebody, for us, we always get those like stressed out emails where there was one the other day where somebody had their identity stolen and they were like apologizing, and we're just like, just don't worry about it. Like, we just credited your account 2 months. Like, we know you're not going to have your credit card anytime soon. Just deal with all of that other stuff. And so we lose a little bit of money, but in the long term, I think it gains that goodwill, and that's really what's going to drive long-term growth.
Well, and they become your fans, like the people who want to sell. Years ago, this happened a few times recently. Years ago, I bought a pair of sandals from a company called Chaco. When I paid to have them fix the sandals, get the new soles on them, and they came back and they were not fixed. And I called them and they said, "We'll just send you a new pair." Like, it was literally almost a 5-minute conversation. And they sent me a new pair. And then actually the new pair broke about a year later. And I said, "Hey, this new pair broke. Can I just send them back? And you send me a replacement? These are free." And it's like, "No, we'll just send you a new pair again." So pretty much everyone in my house owns these sandals, right? Even same with one of the running bags I have. I talked to them probably 4 weeks ago about something, and it was literally, "Hey, this broke. What was it?" I explained what broke. They said, "We can't fix that. Where do I send the new one?" That's the end of the conversation. Like, "Do you want my email? Yeah. Do you want an invoice or anything?" "No, we're fine." Okay.
Yeah, and to be honest too, you talk to some people and like, to get refunds, they have to go through manager approval and all of this, and it sucks up time too, when to empower the person who's talking on the phone and talking with you as the human to make that decision too, is so much better, because it saves everybody time and there's less BS all around.
Yeah, and you don't want to deal with every single one of them, right? You want to have people you trust to say, "Well, this sounds dumb. I can fix that. Here you go."
Yeah, and totally. I think that's the key, is having people that you trust working for you too, so that that they're making the right decisions, and that they're guided by making people happy, which is also what I'm guided by too.
Awesome. Well, where can people find more about you? Acuity, right? What's the URL? Acuity.com?
AcuityScheduling.com.
Acuity
Yeah.
Scheduling.
Yeah. So if you'd like to find out a little bit more about it, I definitely recommend checking out Acuity Scheduling's website. That's acuityscheduling.com, ACUITY scheduling.com.
Mhm.
You can try out the service for free there, and definitely feel free to reach out to me directly. The easiest way to find me is Gavin at acuityscheduling.com is my email address, or on LinkedIn or anywhere else too.
Awesome. And I'll have links to all of that in the show notes, even your email.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm
Okay.
really surprised. Like, I'll throw my email out there, and most people, I don't know, they'll actually prefer LinkedIn or something. People seem afraid to email directly. That, or I have really tight spam filters.
Maybe. How did I got through because I emailed support instead.
Yeah, yeah. Which sometimes can be usually they send it to me. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Gavin.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great chatting with you.